For 6 months, I washed my own dishes in the basement sink, folded my clothes on a card table, and told myself this was temporary. I was 67 years old, a retired civil engineer who had spent 35 years designing bridges across 3 states, and I was sleeping on a pull-out sofa in my own house. My son and his wife had no idea I had already made an appointment with my attorney. Let me back up. My wife Carol passed away 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 8 weeks from diagnosis to the end. After 41 years of marriage, I suddenly found myself eating dinner alone at a table that seated 6, watching the evening news in a house that felt like it was exhaling without her. Our son. I'll call him my son, because that's what he is. Whatever else I now feel, had moved to Columbus for work. We talked on Sundays. He seemed to be doing well. I was managing. Then, about 2 years after Carol passed, he called to tell me he'd gotten engaged. Her name was Simone. He'd met her at a company event. She was 31, he was 34. I was happy for him. I told him to bring her to meet me. They came for Thanksgiving. Simone was polished. Quiet in a way that felt deliberate, like someone choosing their words very carefully. She complimented the house, a 4-bedroom colonial in Westerville, Ohio, on a corner lot, paid off 12 years ago. I'd put 30 years of my life into that mortgage. She walked through the room slowly, the way a person does when they're doing math in their head. I noticed, but I told myself I was being an old man who missed his wife and was looking for reasons to feel uneasy. The wedding was small. My son asked if Simone could move some of her things into the guest room before the ceremony, since they'd be coming straight to my place afterward while they looked for a house. I said, of course. That was June. By October, they were still there, and the conversation about looking for a house had gone quiet. I didn't push. I had the space. Financially, it made sense for them. My son had student loans from his MBA. Simone had credit card debt she'd mentioned once, casually, in a way people do when they're testing how you'll react. I didn't react, I just listened. But things started shifting in ways I couldn't quite name at first. The thermostat got turned up to 74. I keep it at 68, have my whole life. And at my age, a warm house makes me feel sluggish. When I turned it back down, I came home the next day and it was back up. I started finding my things moved. My reading chair, which had sat in the corner of the den for 20 years, got relocated to the far wall to make room for a new accent table Simone had bought. My collection of Ohio State game programs, which lined the shelf in the hallway, was in a box in the garage one morning. Just freshening up the space, she told me, smiling. I said okay. I should not have said okay. By February, Simone was working from home full-time and had taken over the dining room as her office. She'd bought a standing desk that blocked the window. The dining table, where Carol and I had eaten 30 years of meals, where my son had done his homework, where we'd had Christmas every year, was pushed against the wall. I wasn't consulted. I came downstairs one morning and it was done. That was the month my son stopped eating dinner with me regularly. He said it was work pressure. He'd bring takeout containers upstairs and eat in their room. Some evenings I sat at that pushed-aside table alone and ate a bowl of soup and thought about Carol and tried not to feel sorry for myself. Then Simone got pregnant. I found out the way you find out things you should have been told directly. She mentioned it to someone on a phone call in the kitchen while I was in the next room. I waited 2 days for my son to tell me. He did, eventually, sheepishly, over coffee on a Saturday morning. He seemed happy. I told him I was happy too. I meant it. But then the conversation turned. He said that with the baby coming, they'd been thinking about space. The master bedroom. My bedroom, the room where Carol and I had slept for 32 years. The room I had renovated myself in 2009, adding the walk-in closet and the ensuite with the soaking tub, was the most practical option for a nursery adjacent to the parents' room. I asked what he meant exactly. He said Simone thought it would make the most sense if I moved downstairs. "There's a full bath down there," he said. "And the basement's finished." "It's not bad." The finished basement was where I kept my woodworking tools, my golf clubs, a second refrigerator, and the pull-out sofa for when my sister visited from Cincinnati. It had no natural light. It had a single small window at ground level that looked out at the fence. I asked if he'd considered the third bedroom upstairs. There were 4 bedrooms in this house. My son and Simone had the second. The third was used as a guest room. The fourth was a sitting room Simone had redecorated in November. He said Simone felt the third bedroom would work better as a nursery, closer to their room. I sat with that for a moment. "The basement," I said. "Just temporarily, Dad, until we get on our feet." I didn't argue. I've thought about that many times since. Why I didn't argue. I thought about that many times since. The honest answer is that I was tired, not physically. I mean the kind of tired that settles in when you've been made to feel like a guest in your own home for so long that you start to believe it. Carol would have said something. Carol would have set down her coffee and looked my son in the eye and said, "Absolutely not." But Carol was gone, and I was sitting across from my son who used to fall asleep on my shoulder at Ohio State games, and I told myself I would be gracious. I would not be the difficult father-in-law. I would give them the benefit of the doubt. So I moved my things downstairs. I took my dresser and my clothes and my alarm clock and the framed photo of Carol and me at Niagara Falls, and I sat up in the basement. I put the pull-out sofa near the wall and tried not to think about what Carol would have said. That was March. Here's what I didn't tell my son. 3 days before that dinner table conversation, I had overheard something. I was coming up from the basement. I was already sleeping there by then, just in my mind already accepting the situation, and the door at the top of the stairs was open a few inches. Simone was on the phone in the kitchen. I heard her voice, bright and certain the way it got when she was talking to someone she was comfortable with. "The house is worth at least $450 in this market," she said. "Maybe more if we update the kitchen. Once he's out of the picture, we can list it, split the equity, and actually buy something we want." I stood at the bottom of the stairs and did not move. "He won't fight it," she continued. "He barely says anything as it is. And honestly, he doesn't need something this big. He'd probably be happier somewhere smaller. An apartment or, I don't know, one of those 55-plus places." She laughed. It was a light, conversational laugh, like she was discussing nothing more consequential than paint colors. I went back downstairs. I sat on the pull-out sofa. I thought about my bridges. When you design a bridge, you don't just build for the expected load. You build for what you can't see coming. Wind shear, temperature shifts, the variable you didn't predict. You build in safeguards. You document everything. You make sure that when someone questions your structure, you have the data to show exactly what's holding it up. I called my attorney the next morning. Her name is Janet Hollis, and she had handled Carol's estate. I told her I needed to come in and I needed to talk about my options. Janet is 61 and has seen everything. She listened to what I told her without expression. When I finished, she said, "Do you have a recording?" I said, "Not yet." She said that Ohio is a one-party consent state. That meant I could legally record a conversation I was part of, or I could record in a space where I had a reasonable expectation of privacy, which, given that this was my house and my name on the deed, was not a complicated argument. I went to Best Buy that afternoon. I bought a small digital voice recorder. It cost $38. I am not by nature a suspicious man. I spent my career working with city planners and county commissioners and construction foremen, and I got along with almost all of them. I don't like conflict, I don't like drama, but I had stood at the bottom of those stairs and listened to my son's wife discuss my future like I was an inconvenience to be managed, and something in me had gotten very still and very clear. I waited. I kept the recorder in my shirt pocket when I was home. I ate dinner with them on the nights my son cooked. I asked Simone about her pregnancy with genuine interest because I was genuinely interested. That baby was going to be my grandchild, whatever happened between the adults. I moved through the house quietly and listened and waited. It took 11 days. It was a Sunday evening in April. My son had gone to pick up groceries. Simone was in the kitchen when I came up from the basement to make tea. She had her laptop open on the kitchen island, the island Carol and I had installed together in 2014, and she was on a video call with who I assumed was her mother. She didn't notice me come in right away. I moved slowly, unhurried, to the kettle. "It's just taking longer than I expected," she was saying. "I thought he'd be more agreeable. But he just quietly does whatever we say, so that's fine. The house thing should be done by summer if everything goes the way I'm planning." I set the kettle down. She glanced up, smiled at me. I smiled back. The recorder was in my pocket. "Anyway," she said into the screen, "I should go. I'll call you tomorrow." She hung up. We stood in the kitchen together. She asked me if I wanted anything from the fridge. I said no thank you, just the tea. I stood there while the kettle heated and thought about load-bearing structures and how quietly you can dismantle something from the inside if nobody's watching. I had enough. I went to see Janet the following week. I played both recordings. Janet's expression didn't change, but she sat forward slightly, which for Janet is the equivalent of someone else standing up. "She's talking about selling property she doesn't own," Janet said. "That's my understanding," I said. We talked for 2 hours. The house was mine. My name only, since Carol and I had decided years ago, for estate planning purposes, to title it solely in my name. My son's name was not on the deed. He and Simone had no legal claim. What they had was my willingness to let them live there, which was a thing I had the right to extend or withdraw. Janet drafted a formal notice of termination of residency. She explained I was required to give 60 days, which I did, beginning May 1st. She also noted that depending on how Simone's behavior developed, there were potential grounds for a civil action related to the planning she'd been recorded discussing. We decided to hold that in reserve. I want to tell you what it felt like to hand my son that envelope. It was a Tuesday evening. He'd made pasta, which was his one reliable meal, and we were sitting at the kitchen table, the real position of the table, which I had quietly moved back 2 weeks earlier without explanation. Simone was upstairs. My son had his fork in his hand. I put the envelope on the table. He looked at it. He looked at me. "What is this?" I told him it was a notice from my attorney and that he should read it. He opened it. I watched his face. I have watched that face since it was 3 days old. I know every version of it. The face he made as a kid when he got a hit in Little League. The face when Carol told him she was sick. The face at the altar in June when Simone walked down the aisle. I had never seen the face he made reading that letter. "Dad, let me play you something first," I said. I put my phone on the table. I had transferred the recordings, and I played them. Both of them, all the way through. The kitchen was very quiet when they finished. My son didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, "She said that. She said that." He put the letter down. He pressed his fingers against his eyes. "I didn't know," he said, and his voice had the texture of something breaking slowly. I believed him. I want to be clear about that. I believed he didn't know. But not knowing is its own kind of decision. When you choose not to see, you're still making a choice. I love you, I told him. That isn't what this is about. But this is my house. It was your mother's house. And I am not willing to be managed out of it by someone who has been planning this since before the baby was even a concept. He didn't argue. There was nothing to argue. He had heard the recordings. Simone, when confronted, cried. Then she got angry. Then she cried again. My son told me later, much later, after many conversations I will not recount here, that she had told him the house would eventually come to him anyway, that she was just thinking ahead, that it was practical. He said she had presented it all very reasonably, and he had let himself hear it that way because it was easier. That is the most honest thing my son has ever said to me. They found a rental in Dublin, Ohio. 2 bedrooms, $850 a month, 15 minutes from where my son works. It is a perfectly adequate apartment. They moved out on June 28th, 3 days before the 60-day notice expired. My son carried boxes. Simone did not look at me when she left. My granddaughter was born in September. Her name is Alice. I was in the waiting room when she arrived. And my son came out and his eyes were red and he hugged me and said, "She's perfect, Dad. She's just perfect." And I held onto him in that hospital hallway and thought about how complicated it is to love someone who has hurt you and how you do it anyway because they are yours. I see Alice twice a month. My son brings her on Sunday afternoons. Sometimes he stays for dinner and we eat at the kitchen table, the real kitchen table, in the right place, where it belongs. And we don't talk about the recordings or the letters or the basement. We talk about Alice. We talk about football. Once he asked me what Mom would have thought about all of it, and I said she would have seen through Simone on day one, and he laughed, and it sounded real. I never moved back into the master bedroom, as a matter of fact. After they left, I repainted it. New curtains. Different furniture arrangement. It's still where I sleep, but it looks different now, which helps. The basement is a workshop again. My tools are back where they belong. Last month I built Alice a rocking horse, white oak, hand-planed, with a little leather saddle. Took me 3 weekends. When my son brought her over and set her on it, she grabbed the ears and shrieked with a kind of pure joy that makes everything else feel like background noise. I'm 67 years old. I designed bridges for 35 years. I know that the things built to last are never the things built in a hurry, and they are never the things built by people who think they can skip the foundation. You find out what something is really made of when it's under load. My house is still mine. My name is still on the deed. And on Sunday afternoons, my granddaughter rocks back and forth on a horse her grandfather made, in a house that her grandfather built his life in, and that is enough. That is more than enough. I keep coming back to that moment at the bottom of the stairs. The door cracked open. Simone's voice, easy and certain, talking about my future like it was a line item on a spreadsheet. I could have walked up those stairs and said something. I could have confronted her right there, but I didn't, and I've thought a lot about why. And I think the honest answer is that I'd spent 35 years building things meant to last, and I understood, at a cellular level, that you don't act before you know what you're working with. That's not patience as a virtue. That's just clarity about what actually matters. Simone wasn't wrong that I'm quiet. I've always been quiet. Carol used to say I process things like a civil engineer, slowly, thoroughly, and with too many backup calculations. What Simone mistook for passivity was really just the absence of panic. And the absence of panic is what let me think straight while she was busy thinking she'd already won. What I did in those weeks, the recorder, the attorney, the 60 days notice, none of it was clever or strategic in the way people imagine when they hear the story. It was just what a person does when they know what's right and they have the spine to follow through. My son didn't have that, at least not then. He had let himself be comfortable in a story that cost him nothing to believe. And I understand that. I do. Being willfully unaware is always easier than being honest, especially about someone you love. But here's what I know. The choices we make when it's easy are decoration. The choices we make when it costs us something, that's character. My son eventually made the harder choice. He heard those recordings, and he sat with the truth instead of running from it. That took something real, and I don't give him enough credit for it in the moments when I'm still sore about the basement. Carol would have seen through Simone immediately. I've said that before, and I believe it. But Carol also would have told me, somewhere in the middle of all of it, that the point was never to punish anyone. The point was to stand up straight. The point was to know your own worth clearly enough that you don't need anyone else to confirm it before you act. I built bridges for 35 years. I know that a structure fails not because of one catastrophic blow, but because of small compromises repeated over time. A bolt not fully tightened, a threshold ignored, a warning sign explained away. Relationships fail the same way. I had let too many small things pass because I wanted peace more than I wanted honesty, and that's on me as much as anyone. Alice is 14 months old now. She has Carol's eyes, that particular shade of steady gray that makes you feel like you're being assessed by someone much older than they appear. When I hold her on Sunday afternoons, I think about what I want her to inherit from me. Not the house, not whatever's in my accounts. I want her to inherit the understanding that knowing what's right and actually doing it, even when it's uncomfortable and expensive and lonely, is the only way to live without regret. That's all I've got. It turns out it's enough.